If you were here yesterday morning, you saw when Earl was going over the list of IDC activities, at the very bottom he passed very quickly through the notion that we're covering cybersecurity, and so I just wanted to give a quick update and summary of some of the activities we've been up to of late in what's a relatively new area of coverage for the HPC team, but I just want to assure you that it kind of will ultimately bring it back to how we're looking at cybersecurity from kind of an HPC, HPDA perspective. So we'll just start right away. Bottom line is last summer, 2015, we were asked by a US government agency, you can fill in whatever blanks you want there, and really they called us in, and it was interesting because it was an agency that you would assume would know everything about cybersecurity, but what they wanted us to do was in essence do a sanity check. They want to know how they rate against everybody else. What's going on out there in the real world? What are the best practices and perhaps the not so best practices that is out there in the commercial sector? They wanted to make sure that they were covering all the bases, that there wasn't good stuff out there that they weren't doing, or the bad stuff out there that they were doing, just to make sure that they understood exactly where they stood in relationship to the rest of the world. The interesting thing was they really asked us to identify who the standout practitioners were. They were looking to us to more or less identify some of the best-in-class operators out there, and of course in the process, identify some of the worst in class. One of the interesting questions that they did ask us to look at, which I thought was kind of cool, is they asked us to collect a list of things that you better avoid. Don't do this specifically. And I thought that was a really neat question. And for the folks we ended up surveying, we got a lot of really good insights from don't do this. So I thought that was kind of a neat way to do business. I put this up here. I love when people say, I put up an eye chart, don't look at it, and then they put up an eye chart, and then say, don't look at it. But I just did. Apologies. What we ended up doing was we did this huge study, and I think it was Steve who had the stroke of genius to say, let's put this all on a very dense matrix, on one page, front and back, laminated, and almost like give it out as a summary of what we did. And it turned out that the folks that commissioned the study liked that more than anything else. I don't think they actually read the study, but they loved the matrix. And so really what we did, this is just one chunk of the matrix, and you can see we basically went through and said, you know, what's an interesting key trend in metrics? How important is it? Who are the best practitioners? Who are the worst practitioners? And as again over there, things that you almost never want to do. By the way, when we finished the study, the folks that commissioned it said to us, you know, this is really interesting, and we like the results. So the folks that are taking pictures, they told us you can share this matrix. So if anyone is interested in getting the full matrix, just drop a card by or send me a quick email, and we can send this matrix out to anyone who's interested in looking at it. And not only that, we'll turn the crank one more time and say, if you have comments or want to add to this document and say, no, you got this right, you got this wrong, or add this thought, then please, by all means, do. Our role in some sense is to take the work of this government-funded activity and make sure as many people see it as possible, just to get a sense of where they stand, where they rack up, perhaps where everybody else is going. Just so you don't have to read the eye chart, we can talk a little bit about the findings of the main areas of concerns. And here's some of the things that really kind of emerged in the surveys. And we really did, the folks we talked to was a really wide group of people. We talked to folks in a bunch of different verticals, the financial sector, utilities, hospitals, all sorts of broad range of users. So it wasn't like we concentrated on folks who would have a specific agenda to be more cybersecurity aware or even less cybersecurity aware. What we found is most US companies are seriously underprepared to deal with cybersecurity threats. I don't think that would surprise anyone, even though some of the best practices that are out there today could have a significant effect on making them more secure. What was interesting, and I was really shocked by that, is detecting a breach can take up to 2 years. There were cases where folks basically had their security breached, and only later when they were doing some kind of forensics did they actually stumble upon the fact that, wow, this has been going on for an awful long time, there's been access, or we got hit 2 years ago and we never really knew it. That to me is a major stress point as far as I was concerned. Fundamentally, the worst practitioners begin to buy more insurance coverage and wait for the attacks to happen. It's almost as if they take a fatalistic view. We're going to get hit, we're going to get killed, how can we mitigate the costs? And for all the publicity hit that Target took when it was breached, if you look at the financial data afterwards, they really didn't take a significant financial hit. They managed to lay that off on the credit card companies, on some of the insurance companies, and on some of the finance companies they work with. So in some sense, from a pure monetary standpoint, the Target hit wasn't nearly as bad as the press would have you think it was. And I have begun to believe that that's a major philosophy for a lot of companies. If they can deal with the publicity hit, then the financial gains, the financial losses can be mitigated to a great extent. The thing that scared me most is the worst practitioners include hospitals and universities. The hospitals are problematic. I know out in Washington, D.C., last couple of weeks there was a major hit of a major hospital system out there, and it just drove home the point that hospitals are incredibly vulnerable, and I don't know if you've ever been, they have to move much more slowly in many cases. They have lots more regulations on how they can conduct their IT operations, and I don't know if that's a cause or an effect of the fact that they are not very capable when it comes to implementing strong cybersecurity. One of the things we found is that best practitioners see this as a people versus people battle. It's not who's got the best technology, it's really about the people, and if you want to get the best people, you have to hire the top talent and pay them an awful lot of money. I take this comment with a grain of salt simply because we interviewed a lot of cybersecurity people who told us that if you want good cybersecurity people, you have to pay them a lot of money. But it is something I think worth considering. Some quick other main thematic issues that came out of the study is that everyone is interested in exploring the trade-offs between security and access. And basically means, yes, you can have a perfectly secure system if you take all your information and you put it in a block of cement and store it in your basement, but no one can get access to it. And that overwhelmingly is the decision that drives how cyber secure you can actually be. You must allow your employees, your customers, your subcontractors, all the folks that you work with to ultimately have access to your IT infrastructure, and that by definition is going to create potential cybersecurity issues. Most of them are concerned about access through network edges, basically suppliers, remote employees, and others, which is it's an increasing problem because everyone is much more interconnected nowadays, and the idea of just having a main office where you have to come into the building to access the IT infrastructure, that's a thing of the past, and it's only going to get worse as we go forward. Heterogeneity, people want to bring their own devices, everyone's got a different operating system, you have different kinds of access to on-prem IT as well as on cloud, lots and lots of places for a porous IT infrastructure that can be exploited. Just a quick summary, we found the best practitioners, happily enough, were financial service firms, large retailers. Walmart was listed as one of a real savvy cybersecurity outfit. Life science firms, large technology firms, not so best, universities, public utilities, and hospitals, as I said, and middle-of-the-road folks were the manufacturers. So we turned in the study, and as I said, we turned it into a laminated front and back matrix. And so we got invited back recently for, I guess this would be our second summer project, if you will, from the existing government agency, and I guess word got out because a few more agencies joined in and said, hey, can we participate in this as well? Again, remember, to me, the theme here is understanding ground truth. Organizations really like to know what everyone else is up to. This is not an area where people openly share information as readily as they do, perhaps, say, in the HPC community. And so there's always this sense that people are missing something. So the minute we started this study, we had a number of government agencies basically come in and say, A, we'd like to be part of the study, and B, we have money to do that. And we said, sounds good to us. Basically, the study objective here, really then, and I put the quote here, but in reality, what this study is doing is looking to build off the earlier efforts to identify best in class and now go look at those particular organizations to really drive down on what they do best. Now, because we have a number of government agencies and everyone's got a dog in the fight, there are some broad objectives here as we move down, which is caused some interesting problems trying to scope this into a reasonable research project, but they really break down the three major themes. The first one is basically, folks are interested in kind of the strategic vision. What are the best practitioners doing in terms of their cybersecurity framework? Do they have maturity models? Have they done things like ROI analysis? It's very interesting when you try to figure out, if we're going to get hacked or broken into, how can we figure out how much return on investment we're getting from a stronger cybersecurity infrastructure? And the answer is, if you really haven't been breached yet, it's hard to make that decision. And in talking to a number of companies, we found that the ones that were breached had perhaps the most sophisticated understanding of how to do return on investment, because they at least had an existing understanding of how it affected their particular business. The companies that hadn't been hit yet basically couldn't make a decision because they really couldn't scope out what the risk involved here was. And I thought that was kind of an interesting takeaway. So in some cases, the folks that got hit have actually been moved down the road a little bit more, a little more sophisticated, at least in figuring out what's the return on investment if we spend X amount of dollars to increase our cybersecurity capabilities in some ways. Other strategic issues, risk management framework. The other one, which was interesting, is the concept of situational awareness. We saw a real trend for people, and I guess, yeah, I did put this down, the war room configuration. The idea that you have this really glitzy, submarine-like, 24-hour kind of set where you've got big monitors and you are basically have folks who are looking at your cybersecurity capability on essentially a minute-by-minute basis. What's happening right now? And can someone just hit a big red button and close down shop because something interesting has happened or something that can't be explained? And the idea of basically moving to a real-time cybersecurity capability is something that a lot of folks are willing to explore and put some money into. The idea of waiting 2 years to find out if you've been breached is intolerable. Now the idea of waiting 2 days is bad. The idea of waiting 2 hours can be a problem. People are really interested in moving towards real-time cybersecurity detection, anomaly detection capabilities. Interesting concept there that I'm really looking forward to diving into. And of course we have some tactical data that's going to feed this. We're trying to collect number and composition of endpoints, things like firewall patch and upgrade policies. What are the typical practices of the best in class? How do they do these things? How do you characterize, perhaps from a demographics perspective, what a good cyber-aware company actually does? Now, as I promised earlier, we want to tie this back from our perspective into an HPC, HPDA hook. And really what we're seeing here is, and we talked a little bit about, I was talking about that real-time aspect, the idea of big data use for anomaly detection from both a static and real-time capability. The idea that you look at, say, a month of IT activities from systems logs, and you basically come up with, if you try to characterize that and build some rules about what a typical normal work environment looks like, how can you easily spot an anomaly that says, hey, wait a minute, we're seeing some increased access from a facility that's should be dark at that time of day, that's not something we typically see and we can't explain. Can we bubble that up to the top to bring a human into the loop and say, hey, this is an interesting anomaly that we detected because this doesn't fit into the normal profile of our overall cyber infrastructure. That's kind of the static perspective. The real time, of course, is basically, you think of it as almost like a spark-based phenomena. You basically want to be able to understand exactly what your cyber infrastructure is doing at any given moment in time. 2 minutes, right? What are you going to do when I have down to 1? So it's really interesting that this is a case where I think we're going to see more and more big data HPC desire to basically be able to more effectively do real-time situation awareness of what your cybersecurity infrastructure is looking like at that time. And so to me, I think that's really exciting. And again, I'm looking forward to asking a whole bunch of people a whole bunch of questions. So we'll get right to the cyber study. This is where we are now. We've cleared the survey questions with the various government agencies, which took a little bit of time, and so we're in the process of testing the survey right now, trying to work out the kinks, just to make sure we're asking the right questions, and the answers we get are to the questions that we actually ask. We're definitely talking to best-in-class operators. One of my favorite marching orders we got from the folks that hired us is we want quality, not quantity. We don't want an N as some inappropriately large number. Talk to the best-in-class, really get a deep understanding of what their main concerns are, what their main issues are, and then that's the kind of analysis we want to see. But we also want to include some folks that have already been hit publicly, the ones that we know about, because most people have probably been hit, but they don't know about it yet. They will 2 years from now, or they're not making it public yet. Bottom line is we are always on the lookout for more best-in-class practitioners. So if you are interested in participating in this study in any capacity, that would be great. We can send you the survey, and if you say, hey, this is something I can answer, or I'm sorry, this is something that I'm not comfortable answering or don't want to answer, that's fine too. But ultimately, anybody who participates in this, we have been cleared by the customer to basically send again a more in-depth summary of the actual study when it comes out.
Bob, is that just private sector industry or across the board, other folks, universities? for your survey?
Steve, what's really the composition? It's basically private sector, commercial folks at this point, yeah. Any other questions?